Once again, welcome everybody to our Circular Buildings Coalition webinar, Creating Local Economies with Complete Cycling of Concrete. My name is Carolina Montano Owen. I am the technical lead of sustainable buildings at the World Green Building Council, and together with Mikkel Thomasen from Second Innovation, we're going to host this webinar. And I'm very pleased to share the stage today with three amazing experts. We have Dr. Celia Cooper from EPFL, we have Mona Deluc from Holcim, and we have Brad Canabaris from Arab. So on today's webinar, we want to explore how to create local economies with having concrete in a complete loop. So we're going to hear first about the Circular Buildings Coalition from Mikkel. Then I'm going to give you a couple of highlights of our publication, which you can find in our website, and we'll also be sharing the link today. And we have a couple of kickoff presentations from experts, and then we want to have a panel discussion. So we invite all of you to share your questions through a Q&A function while you hear from us. And just for everybody to know, this webinar is going to be recorded, and we're going to host it on our website later on. So with that, I'll hand over to Mikkel. Thank you very much.
Yeah, but a very great welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for taking your time. A busy afternoon, I'm sure. I'm Mikkel Thomasen, and from Smith Innovation, consultancy based in Copenhagen, working with long-term innovation, and among others, we have the great joy of being kind of supporting the Circular Buildings Coalition with management and communication and so forth. So just a very few words on the Circular Buildings Coalition. And then we'll proceed with Carolina and the main topic of today, which is, of course, concrete and local job creation and so forth. But anyway, CBC is a coalition of industry partners and thought leaders aiming at accelerating the implementation of a circular economy principles. And we have been doing this for the last 2.5 years. You can see the names behind the coalition at the bottom of this slide. And I should also indeed mention Laudes Foundation, who have been funding that we could have this kind of forum where we create knowledge and create and share solutions, in a wider audience, people interested in how to make the built environment a bit less square and a bit more round, you might say. And we do this, I think you could take the next slide, Carolina. We do this mainly by two different ways. To the right, one thing is about knowledge sharing. We have been doing various deep dives looking into what is the status of circular economy, what should be our benchmarks, or what should be our targets. A lot of deep dives, of quite a few deep dives, but in different aspects of circular economy. And one of them is the one we're going to present today. So this is one thing we do, and then that is kind of top down, you could say, and then more bottom up. We also support innovative front runners, that is companies and organization who is demystifying assumed barriers to circular principles. And we have just launched recently the 6th winner of this round of so-called blueprint project. That is projects where we support by finance, but also by advice, 6 specific companies developing specific solutions for circular future in construction. And just towards the end of this webinar, I'll just announce the specific date for that. But we will have quite soon kind of the session for these 6 winners. But anyway, that is the main purpose of CBC, to accelerate circular principles, and doing that by knowledge sharing and by supporting innovation. Yeah, I think that was the brief version of us.
Thank you, Mikkel. And today, yes, we are talking about one of the deep dives that we did last year and this year, how to create local economies with complete cycling of concrete. So as I was sharing, we have this publication already available on our website, and I just want to give you what are the main topics of this publication. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with this, but it's important to have in mind the impact of this industry. So concrete is the most consumed material in the world, second only to water, and it provides millions of jobs and has a market size around over $340 billion, and it's growing at an annual rate of over 5%. But of course, it has some impact. So it's responsible for around 7% of our emissions, and in Europe, it's about 4%. And when we talk about waste, the construction waste is around one third comes from the construction in Europe, which over 50% of this comes from concrete. So the purpose of this project was to explore what city manufacturers and designers are doing to reduce the negative impacts, but also to increase the value of cement and concrete. And we thought that a good way to showcase such strategies was using the comparison with the waste hierarchy. So that's why you see in a publication that we are using the cycling of concrete hierarchy, where you can see this pyramid where we are trying to show what are the strategies that we can use, and of course, what are the most preferable towards the less preferable. So as you can imagine, we have at the top of the pyramid how we can rethink and redesign. And here we're not talking about just structures, but of course buildings, but we are also thinking about how can we rethink and redesign concrete itself. And when we think about buildings, we talk about, for instance, modern construction. Then we go to the strategies to reduce and recycle. So first, we want to reduce the amount of concrete, but we also want to keep in mind that concrete is like any other product, and it needs to be monitored and maintained. And when we're talking about reuse, we're talking about the direct use of reinforced concrete elements, and we're going to hear more about that in a second from Celia. And then we have the three strategies to recycle. So we're talking about upcycling, where we can have a higher value of concrete, and there are some pilots about this, where they are using high value cementitious materials. And then we have these strategies to recycle and downcycling. So just a couple of pointers. So in our publication, we have an analysis of four main topics. So first of all, what are the regional disparities? And we realized that there is a big difference in terms of the demand and infrastructure of concrete and reused products and recycled products. So first of all, it happens because of the ability and cost of natural resources. So there are many places in the South and East Europe with the cost of natural resources is relatively cheap, and that's why it's easier to produce virgin cement and concrete. Also, we realized that there are some issues or some challenges regarding landfilling costs and enforcement. And of course, probably the most important is around the infrastructure and logistics. So if we want to reuse and recycle concrete, we need storage facilities, we need transportation, and we need digital platforms that are not always available. In terms of technology and end-of-life practices, there are some challenges regarding lack of information, demolition audits, and the construction protocols. So that's why you see that there are many cities working in this and try to, first of all, have a better information about the building stock and how can we use that to promote the reuse and recycle of concrete. And then, of course, we have also some challenges on policy and ownership and the perception and market and innovation. So on policy, we realized that there are some limitations in terms of how much the recycled concrete can be used. And there is also then there is the complexity of the value chain of concrete, which is very long and complex, and this proposes more challenges as there are several steps to try to reuse and recycle concrete. So there is an opportunity here to use, let's say, current strategies to, for instance, take back schemes or landfill taxes, and of course we have the EU taxonomy, which is trying to promote more of the reuse and recycle strategies. But we can see that there are continuous growth in research, in protocols, in processes, and that's something that we are exploring in our webinar today as well. So we invite you to read as well the Driving Innovation section of our publication. And we want to change a little bit the performance of secondary materials. So when we think about reusing a recycled concrete, we need to realize that that is still a very high performance element that we can use in all of our business. And that's why we have Frank as well to talk a little bit about the design as well. So some key insights from our publication. So we need to have circular and low carbon practices in concrete production, maintenance, and end of life to actually achieve a decarbonized, resource-efficient built environment. There are many innovative and exemplary practices around there, so you can find some of those examples in the publication, but there are many in many cities, so we encourage you to look for them. And the challenges are here to overcome with you together. So we have opportunities to improve the business case, to have the appropriate infrastructure, and of course, await policies and incentives. So with that, I want to hand over to the experts. And first of all, I'd like to hear from Celia. So Celia, when we were having the conversations with you, we realized that reusing concrete element is not a very common practice and it has some complex challenges. So yeah, I would like to hand over to you to see first of where you can explain a little bit the difference in what your research is doing to promote this strategy. Over to you, Celia.
Hello. Do you hear me well?
Yes.
Did you see my screen?
Perfect.
Perfect. Great. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Carolina, and the whole team for who's behind the webinar. Thanks a lot. So I'm Celia Kupfer. I'm an architect and postdoctoral researcher at EPFL, so the Swiss Institute of Technology in Lausanne in Switzerland. And when we were preparing this webinar with Carolina, she asked me to explain, so what's the difference between the concrete reuse and concrete recycling, and how is our research at EPFL supporting a wider adoption of concrete reuse? So these questions, Caroline asked them to me as the concrete industry is urgently developing roadmaps to reduce these detrimental impacts of the concrete use and disuse. And Carolina already introduced this, but strategies include first developing new concrete mixes with lower embodied carbon. She also mentioned using less concrete in new designs, as well as prolonging the use of existing concrete. And this is where most of the concrete cycling comes. And so when it comes to existing concrete, really the first priority is to keep existing structure in place and when needed to rehabilitate them. Then when the demolition is really unavoidable, today we know how to crush the concrete into aggregates, and then these aggregates can be downcycled and used for the backfilling as a backfilling material, and it can also be recycled as aggregates in what we call recycled concrete mixes. And in between these two, in between the rehabilitation and the recycling, there is at least one solution, which is the reuse of elements, which is the extraction of large elements and their reuse directly into new structures. And so concrete reuse and recycling are very different, and let's make sure there is no confusion. So here I will talk about recycled concrete as it is described in standards. So it's concrete mixes with a share of recycled aggregates. That's the only thing I'm talking about. So when we talk about recycled concrete, it starts with crushing the concrete into aggregates, and then a share of the natural aggregates will be replaced by a share of recycled aggregates. And this is really great because this clearly reduces the need for natural resources. Nonetheless, in this type of recycled concrete mixes, you still need to add water, sand, and cement. And because we know that the vast majority of CO2 emissions are related still to the production of cement, then there are no clear or major benefits in terms of CO2. So the other option is to cut the concrete structure with circular saws and to extract large structural elements and to reassemble them into new structures. So this is how a typical operation of reuse could look like. Here it's a wall salvaged from another building, and it's being reused for building this new student housing building. So to summarize, concrete cycling includes several strategies, and the reuse of concrete situates between concrete recycling and building preservation. And undoubtedly, I think it's one of the least known strategies on the cycling course. And for this reason, at EPFL, we've been working on expanding knowledge and design possibilities regarding concrete reuse while building trust and safety for the industry. And we've been working on 3 axes, so analyzing historic and recent applications, developing new reuse strategies, and developing planning tools for the industry. And I'll quickly go over the 3 of them. So regarding existing examples, so reuse of concrete may seem like a very new and very rare approach, but my historical research has shown that it has been already applied to more than 60 structural projects in Europe and in the USA since the late 1960s, and it includes housing projects up to 7 stories in Sweden. And analyzing this recent and historic case study are really key to understand logistical challenges and solutions developed for this project, as well as the technical solutions used. So the second axis on which we're working is to develop new design methods with a focus on in situ concrete. And the lab has developed several approaches to reuse different types of components, ranging from large rubble to big assemblies. And we always build mock-up to verify the supply chain, test the construction details, and conduct structural load tests. And one key way to reuse concrete is to reuse it for the same function as in the donor building. And this way you can really reuse all of the mechanical, all of the structural properties. And we have applied this approach to floor systems, and we've developed a floor system that reuses slabs cut from in situ structures as slabs again. And to achieve this, of course, you need to test the properties of the concrete of the reinforcement bar. Then the cutting plan of the donor building must be adapted. And finally, you can reassemble the structure like in a prefabricated system. And so all in all, it looks like a new system, but it's made with 99% of reused material, also because the steel is reused. So in terms of embodied carbon, there is a reduction of 80% compared to a conventional solid slab, which corroborates with the existing literature. And the last point, I said that the lab was also developing tools to help reuse in practice, and colleagues of mine have developed a reusability assessment protocol. And I invite you to read their paper if you're interested in this topic, because this method was already applied in practice. And to me, one project which is really worth mentioning, it's the deconstruction and the reuse of the Liesbüchel parking building in Basel, Switzerland. So the owner of the parking wanted to build new buildings, and therefore they provided to the participants of the design competition a catalog of reusable components that my colleague prepared, and the participants used the catalog for the design. And so to conclude, the deconstruction operation, so the deconstruction operation is now ongoing, and it's probably one of the largest ever seen with a reuse objective. So to conclude, the interest for this strategy is growing fast as it supports local economies and ultra-low carbon design, and more technical support is being prepared. Here, for example, with the Norwegian standard for the reuse of hollow core slabs. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any question.
Thank you, Celia. That is amazing, and you're doing so much. So I'm sure there are many questions around here. So I want our audience to use our Q&A function to do that. In the meantime, I'll hand over to Mona that is going to talk about a full recycled concrete. So Mona, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. I realize I'm a bit light with just one slide, but that will be it for the next 5 minutes. And I'm happy that Celia was just before me, because she really, again, introduced the basics of concrete formulation, which forms actually the core of what I want to present today. But before that, my name is Mona. I work for the Public Affairs Department of Holcim. I'm based in Brussels, where I follow the development of the circular economy agenda for construction, among other things, but this is my focus of the moment. For those who don't know Holcim, we are a manufacturer of building materials and solutions. We develop materials such as cement aggregates, but also solutions in energy efficient building systems, high performance concretes. And the reason why I'm going to present this is that circularity is more than ever at the core of our business model. We have last year only recycled 6.5 million tons of construction demolition materials, as we call them, and we have a target of 20 million tons by 2030. In Europe itself, we operate 100 more or less recycling centers with the ambition to grow to 150 by 2030. So we have great interest in driving the circular economy agenda and on many fronts, and we do this, of course, here in Brussels by advocating and for regulatory change at different levels, but also innovating and showcasing what is technically feasible and how far we can go today in recycling, upcycling, and bringing the circularity story closer to the decarbonization story. As Celia rightly said, this is also something that is not necessarily achieved today. So what you see on screen is a project called Recigénie. Recigénie is a social housing complex. We're talking 220 units. It's built near Paris in Gennevilliers. It was delivered last year. I could have put a new photo, but this is obviously a rendering, but it has been delivered. People are living in it now. And what is amazing about this is that every cubic meter of concrete poured into this project is made out of 100 recycled content. And the project was developed with a public developer called Séquence, who had obviously a vision to innovate, along with architects A26 BLM and the French National Center, le Centre Scientifique et Technique du Bâtiment, le CSTB, which is a big component of this project. The 100% recycled, I'm assuming there's a lot of concrete experts on the call and who know already a lot about the formulation of the concrete, but achieving 100% recycled concrete means that we have started by achieving the 100% recycled clinker. And as Celia was also mentioning before, cement is a big part of the concrete formulation, among other things, but it's also the most tricky part in the sense that the cement, the clinker, does the biggest job, if we can say, in the cement, in the sense that it encompasses the most important characteristics for the compressive strengths of the cement. So changing any component of that is very, very, very complex, but also very crucial in order to obtain the 100% recycled concrete. So with the clinker, 100% recycled clinker, we then achieved also the 100% recycled aggregates, 100% recycled water to then land on the recycled concrete. When it comes to the formulation, and just to give you, not to give you the full extent, but what did we use instead to achieve the 100% recycled clinker instead of the known limestone and clays, is that we have used material coming from industry waste. Just to name a few, for example, we've used byproducts from mineral processing from power plant sludge, for example, but also construction demolition waste, among other things. But this is where the alternatives came from. The recycled aggregates came from demolition waste from the Paris region, but also from the structure that was also there before social housing were demolished, and we reused some of that waste into aggregates. And the water was from recovered rainwater, but also processed water that we use for washing plant equipment or trucks. And overall, this approach, with this approach, we have managed to save 6,000 tons of natural resources. And I'm sure you're wondering if this whole thing is compliant, and it is. The cement, the aggregates, and the concrete are fully compliant with European standards. The cement itself is a CEM3. The concrete is compliant with the EN 206 norm, and also with the Eurocodes for design of concrete structure. So that is compliant, but it was made possible in France precisely because there is some national complementary norms that enable to get to that point. But mostly important is that there was very close cooperation with the CSTB, the French National Centre Scientifique et Technique du Bâtiment, to make sure that every step of the way was compliant with norms, and that took a long time to come to this point. And that brings me maybe to my conclusion, and also to open the floor on this whole question of scalability. Recigeni, the 100%, it's a project that was made to be and designed to be emblematic, to show that yes, technically 100% is technically feasible, but as many other things are technically feasible. It was done to advance industry knowledge. It was done also to share perspective to the CSTB, to enrich their knowledge about that. That's not just academic, but also industry driven, and to show that we did that by establishing this initial database thanks to this project, and to in general also advance the knowledge around the behavior of recycled materials in concrete. But the 100% today is economically not feasible for many developers, apart from those who really have the vision and the will to invest efforts into this. But it is designed, this project, to accelerate adoption and show that this model can work, not to that extreme, but 5%, 10%, 15%, 30% is absolutely doable and should be done. So yeah, that's basically the nutshell and the essence of this project. Happy to answer some questions too.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mona. Yes, I'm sure there are many questions coming up. But in the meantime, also, we want to hear from you, Frag, your designer's perspective. So how do you see these strategies, reuse, recycle, and how do you use them on your daily basis, on your daily design? So over to you, Frag.
Yep, thanks, Carolina. And the introduction from my perspective will be even lighter with 0 slides. So thanks a lot for the introductory slides you already provided. That was really important for context. Before going there, yeah, I'm Fred Cannavaris. I'm based in London, where I work for Arup. I lead Arup's global concrete materials and concrete decarbonization disciplines, where we work on almost all aspects around concrete and concrete technology, circularity, low carbon concrete, durability, and so on and so forth. But the topic of this webinar is circularity. It's a quite important item on our agenda on how we approach new designs or repurposing of existing buildings and infrastructure. And the reason is that we clearly understand the implications with preserving natural resources. Either we're talking about aggregates or even the other raw materials to produce concrete, but also the difficulties around constructing new buildings, particularly in densely populated areas, for example, that we demonstrate significant activity. Let's pick some example cities like London or New York. It's quite hard to repurpose buildings, quite hard to construct new buildings, and land is also quite expensive for the developments. So we have been exploring quite vividly the possibilities of concrete circularity for some time, and this is not just on the recycled concrete aggregate sector, which is kind of the most simpler, let's say, version of concrete recycling, but also on what has already been mentioned, reuse and direct repurpose existing structural elements of concrete sections. We have some case studies that could potentially share, although there might be some confidentiality issues. For example, there is a tall building repurposing construction in London. It's called the Houston Tower, and there the structural team, together with the structural team, have been investigating how we can reuse parts of the building. And it's kind of interesting process, not only for this building, but for other cases as well, because it takes some convincing, to the client to proceed with those kind of ideas, because when the clients, let's say, pay for a development, when development clients pay for development, they naturally expect that a new kind of constructed building will be delivered to them, rather than a building constructed with older structural elements from other structures. So there is a little bit of convincing and coordination to be carried out with the clients and with the developers, which is quite interesting. It goes beyond the technical characteristics. But on this front, what's quite important for us is that we take an interdisciplinary approach to this problem, to deliver a particular solution, because it's not just the technical characteristics, or it's not just the material performance. We get to a point where different disciplines work together: structural engineers, materials developers, material scientists, and those who understand, for example, client relationships, to all together embark into a journey to work on these topics, and convince the client on reusing structural elements. We've done this, and we understand the challenges also associated with it, also that the industry is not particularly ready to take this on board, or, as I said, in densely populated areas where time is very critical. Attentive demolition and controlled demolition can be quite a challenge for demolition contractors, or it can be a process which takes too much time to be simply accepted. But it's something that we're building momentum on, and all these policy documents do play an important part. I think we also very vocal about the need to have clear guidance on how to appraise these existing structures in order to harvest structural elements and even reuse them in other types of structures or in the same structure, because these type of performance assessment takes time, takes effort, takes resources, takes money, which not everybody in the value chain understands. So yeah, circular concrete, it is definitely a big part of our ambition and our efforts, and also our internal investments. As Arup, we have invested a significant amount of funds internally into building this capacity, building this capability, developing relationships with the value chain, developing relationships with major building manufacturers like Holcim, for example, and have a steering character in this journey for concrete decarbonization. So thanks, Carolina, and the organizers.
Thank you, Frank. And yes, I think you are setting us up to the big question in the room, and I have, I think, a couple of those questions in the Q&A as well. So we're talking about scalability, and you both, or all of you, touched a little bit on cost. And Frank, you were talking about how time is critical, and of course, we translate time into cost as well. So yeah, the question for any of you who wants to jump in, how do you see that we can scale these solutions? How can we promote them in? Yeah, or if maybe provocative, if you think that it's not possible, then maybe we should just look into some other solutions. So yes, the floor is yours.
I could start potentially. If you don't mind. So I think upscaling is always a challenge with any kind of not necessarily disruptive innovation, but not conventional application. And this is because changing the status quo is required, and not only changing it for the sake of changing it, but changing it with a cost-effective manner. So I think upgrading some of the capabilities, or even the perception of possibilities of certain parties across the value chain, is critical, like demolition contractors, for example. We talked about reusing structural elements from building, for example, chopping up slabs, beams, and so on, and reusing them in other sections. This sounds like an extraordinarily odd idea to certain contractors. But if we come up with feasible plan, convincing plan for them to develop, and that should be done in coordination and collaboration with them, then we'll create a far more appealing story. So I think increasing the perception and awareness on the possibilities, that should also come with potential scalability. And perhaps Mona could touch on this. I think investment also is quite important. Of course, this is a developing field, it's not an established field. And, you know, we know a few good people working on the topic and working well together, but we need to get more of this investment going and see what the full potential of these possibilities is.
Yeah, I mean, as I was mentioned, it's true that in general, with regards to contractors and developers in general, I think there's great interest to develop to work on their own value proposition when it comes to circular economy. There's more and more developers that are looking to propose something a bit groundbreaking also in terms of how far we can go with the waste, and we see a new type of collaboration actually between us, a manufacturer, and developers, as to come up with like sometimes unique solutions for identified projects where we want to put the systems in place to enable some very sometimes ambitious targets. So that's indeed one thing. And in terms of investments, there, I mean, I can talk from our perspective. We are trying to, of course, make sure that what's the most important thing for us is that we have access to this high quality waste. And this is becoming increasingly competitive, and it is also increasingly difficult to find if we're talking in a world where demolition is not done in a proper way or in an organized way. And having the hand on that sourcing is absolutely key. And this is why developing the value chain and us investing also in recycling centers is absolutely necessary in order to provide this incoming flow, because we can't promise new products on the markets that have a certain amount of recycled content if we're not sure that we're going to have this coming flow of waste on the long run. So this is something absolutely key that we need to develop. Investments are insanely important here, and we're doing this a lot in Europe. We're doing this also globally. The industry in general is doing it. We're not the only one doing this here, but obtaining, sourcing this high quality waste is the most important step here.
If I may add something, so as Frank really said, it's really important to make these sustainable solutions really appealing to all the actors throughout the value chain, both aesthetically but also economically. And knowledge sharing is really important for that. And next week we'll be releasing an atlas of reused concrete examples where we will really provide the data and share the data on all these projects. We're also providing the economic analysis when they do exist. And that's really important, because what we observe is that there are options to do economy of scales on these processes, which if you don't achieve this economy of scales, they remain extremely expensive. But it is possible to achieve competitive costs. But it's really through knowledge sharing that this can be achieved. And this also opens new possibilities of businesses. For example, now, if you want to use recycled or mainly reused components, you need to invest early. You need to invest money early to make sure someone will pay for the deconstruction processes. And here there are business opportunities for new businesses to jump in. And all the question at first was about the scalability of all these processes. And I think that we should keep in mind that the share of waste is only a portion of the share of concrete we use today, and that all these cycling options will only solve a portion of the possibilities and difficulties related to material consumption.
And perhaps, thank you, Silvia. And if okay, Caroline, now when you're talking, Silvia, there was a question to you actually in the Q&A. So thanks, Silvia. Super interesting and insightful presentation. And have you done any cost analysis between building as usual and then the reuse of concrete as you're presenting? And perhaps could you also split it up in different phases where, yeah, how the cost breakdown will look in different phases? Was a question from Anna 20 minutes back.
Thanks, Mika, for reading it. I cannot see the Q&A for some reason.
No,
so...
I'll do that. That's
okay, great.
Don't worry.
Yes, so the question of cost. So what is expensive with concrete reuse is the deconstruction process. So this must be planned extremely carefully, and you will have a sweet spot somewhere. If you cut small pieces, not only it will cost you a lot of sewing operation, lifting operations, and you will have also to pay a lot for reconnecting these numerous components. And on the same time, if you cut really large elements, you will have additional costs related maybe to extraordinary transportation and maybe also extremely powerful lifting equipment, which are costly to run. So there is a sweet spot in between. And at the moment, there is a large operation ongoing in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, and the full cost analysis hasn't been done, hasn't been completed yet. But they are announcing numbers where the reuse and the new concrete will have similar prices, but this remains to be confirmed. Let's not forget that when you compare the costs of any sustainable solution with another, let's not forget that the price of this other thing is also subject to changes. We've seen with the taxes, etc. You should always keep in mind that comparing can be very, very time dependent and also geographically dependent. So this should always be kept in mind, and always it's just to bring a little bit of nuance in my answer. And finally, when you talk to the client, also let's try also to remember how much does the building material cost in proportion to the entire real estate operation. No?
Sure. And another question for you, Silvia, is whether you have found any difference in reusability between cast and place concrete compared to precast elements.
Yes, that's a fundamental difference. So, the main difference between the precast concrete, the way it's built, definitely is the reuse, because obviously the deconstruction process will somehow be reversing the construction process. And these elements were by default designed to be lifted and assembled together. So this is really the easiest. This is really the low-hanging fruit in terms of reuse. And therefore, most of the past examples we used precast concrete, and most of the standards that exist today are related to precast concrete. But correct, in situ concrete really represents a large share of the built environment in many territories, including Switzerland, where we've done all this research. And when you have cast in place concrete, then it's to the design team, to the project team to decide where to cut. And this is where all this optimization process comes into the game. And still, we have a first set of options, but there is much more to discover.
And a question for all of you, and Caroline, please interrupt me if. But there's also a question about the availability of materials that we can recycle and reuse one way or another. So for experts, do you have an idea of the percentage of new concrete in Europe that can be covered with current concrete? So I guess the question is, how much can we actually reuse and recycle one way or another, or do we anyway have to make new concrete because there's simply not enough to harvest? I think that question could go for all of you also. Yeah, you, Frank and Mona. Obviously, yeah. How much is out there, you might ask?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and there are very few reports on the topic, very few numbers are available. And I can speak for Switzerland only. We have a report that now dates a few years back, and the ratio is between 1% of waste for 6 or 7 portions of new concrete used. But this really needs an update, and this really needs a wider study throughout Europe.
I guess, yeah, this question I think is more geared towards indeed how much can be reused. But I mean, to complement this, I think we can only expect this share, whatever it is now, to increase. And this is something that many incentives that are in development, from pre-demolition audits to the whole global warming potential assessment, and all of this putting in place that will incentivize concrete to be more and more reused. It's true that us, as at the moment, we are looking at recycling as, of course, a solution in between, because there is obviously a good share of the building stock that may not be reusable and that may not be fit for that. And there needs to be a solution, and those who have a solution have to treat that problem. So it's something that that will definitely grow, but also in general, the decrease of probably concrete in construction, with using concrete more smartly and less material in the end. But today it's true that the story has to work in tandem, and it's, of course, there's a waste hierarchy, and it's something that make us aspire for better. But there's definitely all solutions need to be developed today. Of course, there is different levels of how great this recycling is and reuse is done. And I guess this is a question we had all together in our conversation before around backfilling and upcycling, and where to draw the line of what is tolerable today as to recycling. No? But yeah, if you have any data, I would actually be interested to have this. Jean-Baptiste always has good questions.
And I was wondering, Caroline, because actually in the 4th pathway report we did in the Circular Buildings Coalition, we did put numbers to the benefit of using what is already there. I can't remember exactly how detailed it was and concrete. Perhaps you can help me a bit there, or...
I think Mona, you're completely right that it does not mean that because this concrete is discarded that we can go for the highest option in the hierarchy. We always need to check for the state of the concrete, for if there is any pollutants that would really be critical for any of these strategies. And yeah, these numbers are only announcing a sum of concrete to deal with.
And I will also add on this, of course, there are very optimistic growth opportunities for this, but there is also an element of region. You know, the different regions have different needs and different availabilities and different know-hows. So we cannot apply what we could potentially apply in Switzerland. We cannot do it in certain parts of Africa or Asia or whatever. So this ratio of old concrete versus new concrete is kind of dependent on the region and on the regional specific possibilities, I think.
Thank you, Frank. Yeah, I was going to mention that I strongly recommend looking at our publications. The first one actually towards, I forgot the name very quickly, towards the circular economy in the built environment. We have the material analysis for Europe, where you can see those quantifications and also the estimation of how much we can do. I have in my mind like it's around 20%, but yes. Both of our publications have very good statistics if you're looking for it. But I was gonna ask you, I think in conversations with you, somebody said that, you know, we need to remember that concrete is a social material, right? Most of our our structures need concrete, and there is that debate because some experts are kind of suggesting that we should have higher taxes and thinking about those carbon taxes so that we can lower the environmental costs. So yeah, I want to open the floor to you once more to see what are your opinions on this and how would be the impact in both our society and actually the environmental impact. So yes, open to you again.
So I guess, Carolina, the question is also about affordability. I mean, will this make it very costly and yeah, perhaps too costly for some people to pay for, basically? Yeah. Sorry, Mona?
Yeah, no. And I think here there is indeed the low carbon and the circularity. It's two different two different price range and also repercussion on prices. But I mean, in general, yes. If we're talking about adding a premium on low carbon or on circular products, yes, indeed, there is one. The concrete is widely used; it's much necessary. But in the meantime, these whether it's on the one hand decarbonization efforts, and we're talking $100 million of dollars that are being put into like complete reindustrialization of our operations. I'm just talking for Europe now. Or on the circularity front, where you have to organize the value chain to sort, process, get all the quality verification. All of that has indeed a cost. The premium is covering these investments here, and it's more in general. We want to like put the perspective on first of all the share of concrete in the budget of a construction. But also how realistically how this premium actually is absorbed on the way to, in the end, not increase so much more the price of the construction overall. So it's I mean, it's a complicated debate here. There's no denial on the fact that these materials will be more expensive. Whether this can change over time if there's more pickup and these products become mainstream, of course, that's the aim. And there's many mechanisms that can be put in place for this to happen, starting with strong incentives from public authorities with their public procurement. This is just the number one step in order to make these products more mainstream in their use. So, I mean, it's a very big topic. I can move on to the other speakers too.
Yeah, I was wondering perhaps because Celia, I was very impressed by the mapping you had done on 60 projects previously working with reuse and recycle of concrete. And we also have a question about, which is basically about the drivers. I mean, what is driving this? Is it a regulatory demand? Is it a unique position for sustainability or a very strong desire for sustainability? Or is it the market was driving simply based on cost and so forth? So I was just wondering, looking at the 60 projects that you have done historically, could you say anything about what has been driving these projects and perhaps also what kind of drivers that worked and did not work?
So these 60 projects, they are spread over time from the late 1960s until yesterday or today. So the drivers have changed. And of course, when you do this type of study, you have a limited information because it's from the archives. You cannot speak to the project actors from this project who were built 50, 60 years ago. But what is our guess from our reading from the existing documents is that, of course, today it's a question of sustainability. Of course, since the 2010s it's definitely a question of sustainability. But back in the time, we've witnessed two other reasons to conduct concrete reuse. The first one is purely economic. Because you have existing resources, it was a purely economic choice and purely pragmatic choice to keep on the same site and just move to the next building a component. So that's a really pragmatic approach. And then there is a third type of drivers that we analyzed, and it's related more to cultural heritage, and how to keep a Baukultur in place. And this question was really around when the Plattenbau in Germany were about to be demolished. There was also this question of, this is part of the national heritage, and is there a way to maintain them in our built environment?
Okay, but that's quite interesting. Actually, there used to be economic drivers or pragmatic drivers, yeah, as well. Carolina, we have a few minutes left, but only a few. I'm wondering, because you have been doing this report, and any final questions or perhaps a final insight, and also what did surprise you when you did this deep dive into concrete as you have been leading?
Thank you, Miguel. No more questions. I mean, I was very positive surprised that there is a lot of research going on, a lot of innovation and commitment from all the value chain. I mean, we saw cities driving new policies, we saw manufacturers, all of them are trying to get greener concrete, but also reuse and recycle more. And of course, in our daily basis, we see more design trying to show that the performance is actually as the same as virgin concrete. So yeah, my invitation is for everybody to look at that section of driving innovation, but just yeah, be curious, because there are many cases out there that unfortunately we had no opportunity to put them in the publication, but there is a lot moving. So thanks for that.
Yeah, and perhaps time for sharing the last two slides, if that's okay, because yeah, we have 1 or 2 minutes left. So thank you all for participating. I mean, this was just a highlight session, and we didn't answer all of your questions, but most of it, I hope. We will, of course, if okay with the presenters, share the slides, the ones you're having. Yeah, so everyone signing up will have the slides. And just remind you that the 25th of September, so rather soon, we will present 6 of the Blueprint project. That is 6 projects that we are supporting in order to make circularity happen. And I think you will actually see that we have quite a lot of them directly or indirectly relating to concrete and tough materials in load-bearing structures, either directly or also by creating insurance models that will take away risks to the client and so forth. So even if you are dedicated concrete specialist, I think it will be worthwhile participating also in this webinar, presenting the 6 winners and their ideas the 25th of September. And the very final slide is just to say that thank you for joining, and please follow us on these occasions, and please do reach out either to us in Smith Innovation or to Carolina or any of the presenters if you have any additional comments and questions. So once again, thanks a lot for being here today.
Thank you, Miguel, and thank you to our experts. Thanks so much for the support and yeah, sharing with us today your insights. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.